Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. We are studying in the book of 1 Thessalonians. We left off kind of in the middle of a sentence, actually, and it was just one more verse in it, really. So he had been giving us this encouragement that we are not asleep as they are asleep, and that the day of the Lord should not overtake us as a thief. Even though that's what a great number of Christian preachers will say, Jesus is going to come and take you away like a thief. He's going to steal you from the midst of the earth and take you away to heaven. But really what it is at his coming, he gathers us together with the righteous dead, and then he proceeds to the battle of Armageddon. That's the actual sequence of events, and we proceed with him. So he died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, meaning whether we're alive or whether we're dead, whether we're conscious or unconscious, because that's what death is, it's an unconscious state, we should live together with him. So what's that mean? Meaning that God has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation. Whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him, because we have the promise of eternal life through our faith in Jesus Christ. It is through faith in Jesus Christ that we receive the promise of eternal life by the grace of God. And this causes, as I describe it, as sort of a cascade. Faith in Christ should cascade into greater faith, love, should cascade into an acquiring of knowledge, both of the kind of, you should learn some facts, right? Some sort of head knowledge, but also the practical knowledge, which is, I would rather, God, would I rather? I don't know. But it is equally important to have a testimony in the way we live our lives as it is to be able to articulate Christian positions. Because ultimately, no matter how good we are at articulating our positions, if we are found to be, hypocritical about our positions, then people are going to be less inclined to listen to us. Now, that it's hard. Hypocrisy is pretending. It's like, I'm not going to get up here and pretend that I'm as righteous as I want to be. But, sometimes there's a sort of I call it what do I call it? It's almost a fake sort of, I sin, but there's no. But then the way they treat other sinners is sort of makes you feel like, they don't think their sins are as significant as the sins of others. And that I touched on this in a study I called Holier Than Thou. Because I say, a lot of people don't understand the idea of holier than thou, or it's hard for them to see themselves as being that way. Because we don't think, because people generally think, especially Christians, it's like, well, I'm not holy, even though that's your purpose. You're supposed to be, one of the purposes that we've discovered in Thessalonians is that God's will for you is your sanctification. And sanctification is the direction, it is the process by which one becomes holy. But if you say it to someone like this, I'm not as sinful as you are, all of a sudden you can kind of see that's the same thing as holier than thou. I'm not as sinful as you. It's an attitude you take on, where like your crimes are less forgivable, less, mostly forgivable, right? Mostly forgivable, less redeemable. They begin to look at people as being sort of irredeemable, unforgivable, and that's not for me to judge. Certainly with regards to the soul. Sometimes in society, though, if you do certain things, you have to go to jail or whatever, they have rules, and when we violate them, we have to live with the consequences. But it does not mean that you cannot restore yourself to God's, well, we shouldn't do certain things as Christians, obviously, and I do believe that the influence of Christ in our life should be the motivating force, and also the power to live an upright life, at least upright enough that we could, avoid the worst things that could happen to someone in this world, as far as like punishments and such. So he died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. His death brings us the promise of salvation, whether we wake or sleep. It's like when I said, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living, of those whom God sees as alive in the resurrection. God is not, it's like when you see the book of Revelation, like, it's weird. It's not, to God, that's not the future. That's just what's going to happen. Like, that's what happens at that point. I don't even know how to wrap my mind around God, who is eternal, and what it would be like to be an eternal being, the ultimate being, looking at a timeline and creating things on a timeline. It's like, is it just like he's just, I just don't think he's there like a kid, like winding up a car and letting it go. It's like more like he's setting up his track and making the train go around and around or whatever. I mean, not that it goes round and round, but what I'm saying is, like, it's more, there's what I mean, like, one's a creative process, the other is just not. Now, it's like you build up a wind-up toy. Even if you build a wind-up toy, like, if you're the builder of it, if you're God, you build a wind-up toy. And, like, when you let it go, it's not like you don't know how all the gears work and how the rubber is going to affect, how the rubber is going to interact with the surface design, because you made it that also. Anyways. It is a promise of life through God, with God, to enter into eternity at some point, to have everlasting life. He has not appointed us to his wrath, but to obtain salvation. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also you do. You already do this, and he's saying, encouraging them to do it more. Continue in this. Continue to comfort one another and edify one another. And I'll just quickly comfort, parakaleo, edify is oikodomeo. Oikodomeo is it means to build up the house. It's actually, we get our word economy from it. Oikodomeo, no. Oikonomeo is where economy comes from. Oikodomeo, yeah. The oikonomia means to build up the law. I forget. But it's similar. Okay, I just got confused for a second. But oikodomeo means to build up the house. It is used sometimes of when someone who is, well, whatever, and that's a great word, because obviously there's a building that is the church, so to speak, but is not the literal building of brick and mortar, but there's a metaphorical church building that is built up, and it is built up out of people. And so therefore the edification of one another is an essential part of this, because it builds the house, so to speak. By building one another up, you build the church up, right? So we edify one another by building each other up. And it's not, don't think of it in terms of flattery, but you can justly, it is good to justly remark on someone's positive contributions, and help them see, a lot of times people, a lot of good people, a lot of very conscientious, kind-hearted people have a very negative attitude about themselves. Like they'll because they see, they love the Lord and they love righteousness, and they see in themselves the flaws that are still there, because they are not perfect. There are some people who just seem so amazing, and you have access to them, and they seem just about perfect. I mean, they don't have any vices. They don't drink. They don't use drugs. They're kind generally to people, but they still make mistakes. And they are not likely to, of their own accord, build up themselves by saying all kinds of great things about themselves, because their humility kind of forbids it. So it is essential. This is why the church is important, because it's essential to build one another up, to tell that person the positive things about themselves that you see, and to help them, be built like that, because because I think it is kind of, we can't be wallowing in self-doubt and wallowing in fear and wallowing in all these negative emotions and thought processes, because they don't help us at all. It may provide some sort of motivation at a time. And sometimes it's good to go to the house of mourning. Like I said, it's better to be the house of mourning than the house of mirth, because you sit there and you consider life and death. And it is better at times but it does not mean that one should dwell, better the house of mourning than the house of mirth refers to the idea of, like, the house of mirth is where you're carefree and and absolutely letting loose and partying, so to speak, and having a sort of who cares attitude. Like, isn't this fun? Just fun. Now, for some people, the thought of the purpose of life is to have fun and to seek pleasure. It's a sort of a hedonistic outlook. And certainly when you compare hedonism to the melancholy of considering life and death and those things, it is better to consider life and death, and that way you can repurpose your life to do something meaningful or useful, as opposed to just being useless and being a pleasure, self-seeking type person. Well, that is a far different cry from someone just wallowing in self-pity, doubt, and fear. And so, I created my own problem and there I solved it. But it is important to edify one another for that reason, because sometimes people just aren't able to pick themselves up. And so it is important for us to fulfill that role, is pick them up, dust them off, and help them move forward. Now, there's a certain amount of mourning which is about, like, over sins, which is appropriate. There's some that is, inappropriate, and it's unproductive. Because if especially if people who are, it's one thing, like, when you have an ongoing issue, but someone who just has, like, an occasional problem, like just some sort of misstep. When you make a mistake, there's no reason to just dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it. Yeah, you do the appropriate amount of self-examination. You look at what went wrong. You think about it. You understand. You resolve to be more watchful, or whatever it happens to be you decide you need to do, and then you go and do it. Or you try to go and do it next time, and and maybe the next time takes a lot longer to come around because you've just grown that much more. So, all right. So, wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also you do. We beseech you, brethren. Comfort yourselves together. Parakaleo, I mentioned the Greek word. It means to call to the side. It means to, come here, let me have a word with you. And it can mean to comfort, as you might say, but it's not necessarily, I mean, it does indicate an idea of causing to feel good. There's nothing wrong with feeling good. So you don't necessarily want to make someone consistently feel bad, but it is the counsel, to draw someone near, to give them counsel. It is not necessarily about there it'll all be better, but of, like, giving actual, you think about the things Paul has been saying. He's not just praising them, he is also giving them reasons to be comforted. And the art of comforting someone in the faith is important, I think, on some level, to have, you want to be able to articulate things, because parakaleo has kaleo in it, which means to call. You know what I mean? And it's to call someone, sort of, you can call them back to their faith, or call them to the knowledge of the good things that God has ordained for them, and to call them to the to where you may be. To be able to comfort someone, you have to have some sort of position of you have, it's like when someone can come in from the cold, so to speak, to warm their hearts, to revive their spirits. And we beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you and over you in the Lord, and admonish you. They admonish you. That means they tell you the things you ought to be doing. It does not necessarily mean, it's not the same as rebuke, but rebuke and admonish are certainly things that Paul says that we should do. And I'm just using, as always, Bible Hub here to just check the words. Nalphateo, to admonish, exhort. Okay. It doesn't help me a whole lot. Okay, so, yeah. So an admonishment is a sort of a, generally speaking, like I said, it's like this is what God has called you to do. This is what we need to be doing. This is how we need to be. This is how a Christian walks. This is how we can obtain the gifts of God. And just to rehearse to people what they need to do. You could interpret some of the things even said today as a form of admonishment, like to tell. Meaning you give them a strong injunction to do a certain thing or to not do other things. And esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. Those that labor among you and that admonish you, to know who they are. Who are the ones who are doing all the work? Who are the people who are doing all the work? Well, the ones that are doing all the work, esteem them highly in love for their work's sake because of what they do. Be at peace among yourselves. There's a very, it is a very common thing in churches for some people, not all the people, but for some people in church to just constantly grumble about the leadership. And that is a very easy temptation to fall into, to grumble about the way they're doing their job. They're not doing it right. Maybe they aren't. But somebody's got to do it. And is anyone helping? Has anyone offered to help? Sometimes people are incompetent and you offer to help them and they don't want your help and they just continue doing a bad job. And, but those are going to be people who are ineffective and their labor is not, people are going to, I tend to think that the labor of such is going to tend to be not valued by very many people. They're not going to value that labor because it is ineffectual, because it is, because they are exhibiting a sort of incompetence that does not profit people. People need to profit in the things of God, and then they will gladly, I think, esteem very highly those who have helped them to profit in the things of God. And that is the primary work. There's also the work, of course, in churches often when you have enough people. There's the concern for the poor and stuff. Though this makes more sense in other countries, I think, because in America, in the whole world, if you make more than $30,000, you're in the top 1% of everything in the world. That is exceedingly blessed. And though it's tough to get along in countries where there are people who are just super wealthy. There's super wealth all over the world. But in countries where there's a lot of people who are actually very well off, a good number of people that are very well off, it is easy for people to become envious when they are near the bottom in that particular country. But they, if you take a little broader perspective, and also the fact that the reason everyone's so wealthy in our country is because we have the freedom to pursue it. And there's generally reliable laws, and you can, if you have the right gifts, you can make more for yourself. Or you can always, even if you don't, you can seek greater training to get, to find something you can be competent at. There's always a certain percentage of the population through their lack of intellect that can't learn some important skills. And so that becomes crippling to them. So it is important that in all things we remember the poor. And in this country we generally do, at least at least for families. We certainly take care of the women with children. All right. And to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake, and be at peace among yourselves. Because when the criticism of the ministry causes grumbling. And it's like sometimes ministries need to be criticized. Certainly there's Paul also talks about other things, but he's talking about the Thessalonians directly there, and there's no problems there right now or anything for him to rebuke. He's just giving them advice, meaning things are going well. Continue in doing those good things. The ones who are, take note of who's doing the work here, because the work's going well, and esteem them highly in love because they are working, and it is working, and it's going well, and be at peace. Don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg, so to speak. There's sometimes a tendency when things are going well to start looking for faults and stuff in people and try to pick them apart. And that's, I think, what he's guarding. He's not saying that directly, but he's sort of guarding against it by giving this admonishment to be at peace among yourselves and esteem those who labor among you highly. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, and be patient towards all men. I was sort of getting at the supporting the weak, because they are weak, they are feeble-minded. Let's go through these things. This is his exhortation. I wonder what the word here is. Which of the ones we've already heard is this word? And I'll bring this up this time. I don't know why I even bother, because it's sort of like, it's not particularly grandiose, but it's just, I feel like, what does he keep doing there? It's like, okay, here we go. Ba-da-bum. And then, feeble-minded. Now, you can't see the pop-up when I highlight that, but I see it. It says, first I want to exhort. Parakaleo. See, that's why I was saying comfort is not necessarily, it means to call to. You know what I mean? It does not mean like I said, like give them a warm, fuzzy hug and make them feel good, though it can bring about good feelings, right? And to bring someone to the right kind of knowledge, to comfort. I mean, that's what the Holy Spirit, when it's called the Comforter, this is the word. Parakaleo. It's a combination of, it's like, in English we have, we get a lot of it from Greek, like we have paragraph, para and graph. These things are two brought together. And I'm not going to try to get through the etymology of paragraph, like how those words work together. But para means like two or four. Parakaleo. Kaleo means to call. It's a very standard word. It even sounds like call in English. Kaleo, K-A-L-E-O. Call. I don't think it's derived from that. It's probably just, we don't get much English from Greek, but we get a lot of fancy words from Greek, that's for sure. Like medical terms. And also stuff you would find, highfalutin words, basically. A lot of them come from Greek. So those that are really, I already looked this up earlier, are atactos. Now you guys see the word, there's another word. I believe we get our word tact from this. The untactful. Okay? I don't know if that's how it meant in Greek, but it means out of order, out of place. It seems pretty close. At first, actually, my first thought was tactics. Right? Which is probably not inaccurate, I'm wondering if I should just leave this up, because I'm going to look at all these words, but let's just look at them now, and then I can remember it, because I'm pretty good at that. Feeble-minded is oglia, oh boy. Oligo, I don't know. It's a really hard to pronounce word. Oh, I can look at the pronunciation. Oligopsuthos. Faint-hearted. That's what it says. It doesn't help. Faint-hearted. Well, it's a lot different than feeble-minded. But I can use weak, asthenes. I know that one. Without strength. Patient, persevere. Okay. Weakness is the lack of strength, and that can cover all kinds of things. Like I said, it could be mental strength, it could be physical strength, it could be any sort of ability, or without the strength to persevere, without the strength to endure, without the strength to perform, without the strength, there are the feeble among us, the weak. We ought to help them. Yeah, that's part of our duty. That's part of our labor, is to help those. Part of that, it's like if someone has trouble, like the Bible. I remember when I was young, I didn't know anything about the Bible. I picked it up, I tried to read it, I couldn't read it. There's nothing, but over time, if you engage in a subject, you will gain strength in it, or knowledge, or competence, or however you want to characterize that. And that's why it's good to have a teacher. And that's what I try to support, is try to help people understand a book that is somewhat complicated. That it's not that complicated, but the way I look at it is, it is rich in meaning, and to be able to draw that out is it's a gift. And so I'm glad to be able to share it, to draw out the meaning behind it, and to help people understand. You could just read over this stuff, and it's not going to penetrate. It's like, that's why I like to break it down. Even these little, like, he's just telling them little things. It's like, I remember just reading this stuff and being like, yeah, yawn. It's like, oh boy. I just have major throat phlegm right now. Water. Throat's dry, sorry. I should do? So while we're doing that, we'll just do this. I'm going to have some coffee here, and we're going to say, subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies. Click on the like button. Click on the little bell so you get notifications whenever this... daily we have a live stream, right, Monday through Friday. And I have other videos I want to do. I got in the works and plans and stuff. Because... this is not my bread and butter. This is, I have a job and stuff. And so this is, so the videos I get to do are not as frequent as I'd like to be, but we will see what happens in the future. oraclesofgod.org. That's my website. There's stuff there. Okay. YouTube user Paul Schmidt, that's my other channel. It's going to be dedicated to music as soon as I get time to go and fix it. Gee. It's funny that G is a euphemism for Jesus, but I do mean that in all sincerity. Oh, Jesus. Help me there. Okay. Oh, and also, if you have any questions, you can send your questions to this email address. You can also post them in the chat, which I'm going to look at right now, which appears to have no questions in it. You can also leave, if you missed the live stream, you can leave a question in the comment section. It's good to leave your question, if it pertains to a particular video, in the comment section of that video. If you have a general question or a suggestion, you can email me at the address provided, questions@oraclesofgod.org. So... all right, so those that are unruly, ataktos, out of order, right? And our idea of tact means like there's the right thing to say at the right time. There's an idea of having the correct tactic when you talk to people. Now this is, I don't know. Some people, I know people and have known people who seem to have no tact at all, and I pity them because I'm like, they don't seem to be able to learn it, or they don't care about it, and I don't understand what kind of mind virus they got that doesn't allow them to see the benefit of this. I knew a person, and they just didn't think that they needed to be tactful, and that what they thought is everyone else needed to tolerate them and their rudeness. And it's just like they had this entitled sense of like, well, they say what they think at all times, and just everyone else should deal with it. And then, because it is more of a question of tact than of a lot of other things, they do things that are out of order. They cross boundaries. Like they do things that that offend people consistently. Warn them that are unruly. They need to be warned. And it's a problem because they continue. I've had people like this in my life, and they can. And I've seen, and I know of other cases of other people who've encountered the same kind of thing. These unruly types can cause a lot of damage in their personal relationships, because and what they do, it's like they can continually do this sort of unruly, out of order behavior, right? But it's kind of like it's just out of order. It's not the right thing to do, but it's not like you point it out to someone and they're like, well, it's not a big deal. Often it's just some little thing. They've broken a little social rule. They've crossed a little boundary and gotten a little bit too in someone's business. They've crossed, they just do a little, they think that they can bend the rules of polite conversation, of maybe someone's house. They don't respect the home of someone maybe they've entered into. They're disrespectful in public to people, humiliating them perhaps in some small way. And in extreme cases, they continue in this constantly, and they just destroy all the relationships around them, because they have no proper understanding of interpersonal tactics, of like not just doing whatever seems, I don't want to use the word profitable, what seems expedient at the time. For a lot of times, for the sense of expedience, like, well, we'll just go right, we'll just go right to what I want, and the consequences, who cares? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? That's a lot of the thought process. What are they gonna, if I just do this rude thing, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're just going to have to deal with it. And that kind of attitude destroys relationships, and it also, the thing is, if they don't stop doing that, it becomes like a big sin. Because it's like, it's not just the quality of your sin, it's the quantity. And if, especially if they're not like, it's one thing if someone's untactful and like, oh, I'm sorry. God, I've been untactful. I've said a lot of untactful things. A lot of things were out of order where I was like, oh, why did I say that? I didn't need to say that. I shouldn't have said that. And I live with regret, and I repent. But sometimes the examples I'm thinking of, those people are unrepentant, unapologetic. They just want everyone to just have to deal with them, and that's just, you've been warned, right? I don't know. The consequences come. People don't want to be around you. People don't want to talk to you. People don't want you in their life because you will not respect their boundaries and borders and things like that. Because even the smallest infraction is an infraction. And that's what tactful is usually, it's seen as some sort of like small. It's just a bit out of order. But it's a tendency towards disorder. And I don't mean disorder like a messy room, like mine is getting to be right now. I don't mean that kind of disorder. I mean the kind of out of order, like disorderly, like they would say disorderly conduct. That's an extreme form, but I'm just saying that kind of disorder. Where it's like, this is not how people are supposed to behave, but in a small way. Comfort the feebleminded, or it said faint-hearted. Now, I don't have time to go through that word precisely, but like I said, support the weak. The weak covers the feeble-minded. Let's talk about the faint-hearted. You know, what it means is like a lack of courage, right? That's the idea of the faint heart, or a lack of there's courage. There's also the constitutional consideration of endurance. A lack of like the feeling of they don't have courage. They don't feel like they can endure. You know, and that is the same comfort. Let's see, exhort was parakaleo. I'm guessing comfort is not parakaleo. Because why would they not translate it the same in the same sentence? Because that drives me a little crazy sometimes. It's like, come on, get it together. You guys have the text right in front of you. Let's see, support the weak. What was support? And support, to hold firmly too. I mean, support like in a physical sense, but also it's a metaphor, right? Support, like in fact, I think of the prophet Isaiah when he said, you know, the Lord does cut off from Jerusalem the whole support, the support of bread, the support of water. It is the things that underpin our very livelihood. So when it talks about giving support to the weak, obviously it means in every sense that they need it. Some people just don't have ability. Patience toward all men is added in comfort the feeble. Oh yes, comfort here is pamutheomai, which is to encourage. So the word comfort here is different than the word comfort in that earlier verse in Greek. That's one of the nice things of having a tool like Bible Hub, because like you can kind of, a lot of these words, it's like there's subtle distinction between them. And you know, honestly, I don't even need to go to the Greek to teach this. I can just sort of make up what I think it ought to mean. And you know what? It's still going to be true. I mean, I wouldn't make up and say, oh, the Greek says this and I'm just making it up. What I'm saying is I could say, well, comfort means to encourage here. Like I might come up with that. Or I might just say to give them comfort. Like I said, comfort, the earlier word parakaleo, does not necessarily mean like to make them feel good. You know, to pet them, at times that may be what someone needs, or at least a loved one may need a hug, you know what I mean? But it is not the express idea of here in comfort. We think of comfort as like, you know, let's go to a funeral and comfort them, and you give them a hug and pat them on the back, and that's the form of comforting. But it really is your presence there and showing that you care about their loss and telling them whatever words you may have to say about their departed loved one. Departed, there we go again. In the Old Testament and the New Testament, they talk about the dead as asleep and as being right there. And in our modern way of looking at death, we call them the departed. They're gone. Bye-bye. Anyways, it's just a difference of the way we look at death. Okay. So encourage people who are faint-hearted. It makes more sense than like we translate that. I'm pretty sure this is not feeble-minded. Well, in the sense of feeble-minded, if you think of it in terms of being, like I said, lacking courage. Like my mind is not, I mean, because we talk about faint-hearted. Isn't it funny that we say faint-hearted? Now we know that the heart is not a brain, right? But, but we understand what is meant and the difference between the idea of feeble-minded and faint-hearted, at least in modern English. I mean, I could go to just anybody on the street and say, what do you think the difference between these two words is? And I'd get some sort of idea of courage. So feeble-minded is a poor choice for translation. Comfort, to encourage the faint-hearted. You can do it. Yes, you can. You are able, through the power of Jesus Christ, to obtain all the blessings that he has laid out before us. God has, one of the scriptures I love to quote all the time. He has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness, that we may be partakers of the divine nature. You have been called to the Lord Jesus Christ, to a kingdom which is in heaven, which is coming to earth and is now even within us, we who believe. It is in us, in a seed form. And it is growing, and someday it will emerge fully formed. And the man, Jesus Christ, returned to this world. And in that kingdom, you have a place and you have a role to play. And you have a purpose in this. Otherwise, God would not have chosen you. He didn't just choose you to save you. He chose you for a purpose, to whatever aspect, to support the work of God and to become a citizen of that nation. Of that, it's not just a nation, it's a world. Right? To be part of that world. And he has provided through his Spirit everything you need, everything that is necessary. So there's no reason to be faint-hearted. God will carry you through no matter what challenge is before you, whatever suffering lies before you, whatever difficulty is in your path. You must know this, that God has made it in this world so that all things are working together for your ultimate good. And that whatever you're going through is going to make you stronger, is going to build you into the person that God has ordained that you should be. Remember that Christ, our Savior, suffered on the cross. He was crucified. He had his hands pinned with spikes. But since I'm a shroud guy, I want to say like through here, though not here. Okay, this is where they nailed him. Because if you tear here, it'll go right through your hand. You know, that's why on the shroud, all the medieval artists drew the spikes going through here, but on the shroud it's here because it's medically accurate. But he was pierced through in his feet, and they stabbed him in the chest, and he died there. It's like, that's pretty, and he was only about 30 or so, only about 30. That to me was ages ago. I feel like I was barely a man. I was like just barely a man. Now, after I became 40, I realized, I'm like, nah, I am a man. I see why in the Old Testament it was like the men of war were all the 40-year-olds. Because it's a, I've made my children. They still depend on me, but I've made them, and they could get along without me now. I have descendants, and I'm certainly at the height of my power. Maybe a bit rickety and stuff, but I am formidable. I'd probably be more if I didn't have to work at the computer all the time. Be in better shape. Still. See that. Be patient toward all men. Let's say a little about that. All men is be patient. It doesn't say all men. It just says be patient toward all. Patient with the unruly. Patient with the faint-hearted, the weak. Patience is something we should add to our faith. Some of the things in the epistle to Peter, second epistle, chapter 1, add to your faith, virtue to virtue, knowledge to knowledge, temperance. Is patience in there? Well, it should be. I'll put it in my list. It is on my list of things we need. It is not the easiest thing to obtain. It is obtained often through being put through things that are difficult to be patient with. Having children is a good way to learn patience. I admit when I was a young father, I was not patient, and I still haven't learned all the arts, let's say, of patience. It's a very artful thing, because it is a sort of it is like a mental governor that kind of cools you down, and like, so it is so easy. I know, as someone who is pretty quick to learn things, pretty quick to understand, and it is very easy for me to get frustrated with people who are not keeping up. And I'm not, Bible teaching is one thing, but I mean just more like things like just stupid things, like literally, I don't know. I know definitely, see, that's the thing, is to avoid it. Sometimes I avoid having to do patience by just doing everything myself, instead of having to teach people like skills that I know that would be a long, slow process. I tend to want to just just take care of it myself because it's easier. It's true. And I want to teach, but sometimes it's like, and I'm just thinking like in my own family life, it's like sometimes like I have some big job to do, and my wife will say get help from some of the kids. I'm like, it's more work to have them helping me right now. And it's not that I don't want to. It's just that maybe at the time it is not practical. And so I know that like it will take a lot of patience to teach this. And it may not be an appropriate time. I mean, that's just something I'm thinking about in my own life. It's like I know that sometimes I avoid trying situations because I know that I can't afford the patience, because it's like this job has to get done. You know what I mean? And there's no time to teach someone else to do it. Sometimes that's the case. That's not a question of being impatient with someone in this sense, I should hope, because I don't want to be like, I'm trying to avoid being impatient by saying like, okay, I'm going to try to teach you this, and you got to learn it as fast as I could do it without learning it. It's like, so it becomes really like, I know it's going to be trying because maybe I have a deadline I'm working against, and that's just, now's not a good time to teach. But, we all have to learn. We all have more to learn. I certainly have plenty to learn. Certainly in the execution of what it means to be a Christian, I have much yet to learn. 15, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. And that is one case where I would say I don't think he means it in any sense other than it seems on the surface. He means towards all people. Not just all, well, because he's using very absolute terms. None render evil for evil to any man. And that definitely refers to any man. I mean, that's a definitely universal term. It means you don't want to render evil for evil. That is something we've been called not to do. That's harder than you may think it is. Like, if I came home and found someone violating my home, I'm pretty sure that there's like a switch in my head that would turn me into a monstrous person who would stomp their skull into the floor. I don't think it comes across on the screen, but I'm a very large person. And I just, and I know in my family history there's a lot of like, let's say, passion. I'm very passionate about my family and very fierce in defending them. And the idea that I would just come in and not just restrain and call the police, but like immediately take retribution. Probably beyond the whatever might be going, I mean, like, I don't know, it's like, there's no such thing ever happened. I certainly don't like to think about such things, but when you think about it, it's like your first thoughts of how you would react, that's in your heart somehow. It's like, that there's violence inside the human heart. That is something that's not like, some people would deny some parts of their nature. It's like, I know that's in there. I certainly, when I was younger, I saw myself do things in rage. And even when I was not so young, I know that I could see when the rage is unleashed, what I'm capable of. And so this is something that, I hate having, like I said, I've had evil done to me that I did not return. But also it just hurt, mostly because it was done to me, I guess. Yeah, when evil is done to me, honestly, I have no problem with, I generally do not get enraged and stuff. Though I remember when I was younger, I had more of a, I don't know, I was more inclined to get angry over those things, like an insult, for an insult. I attacked someone once for insulting me, you know. And so now I would say more feel defensive of the people I love, you know, my family and such, that I would feel passionate, and it feels difficult to me for evil done to them. That isn't evil done to me. You know what I mean? It's not, I can't separate it. But it definitely is something I know that's like somewhere deep down in me there is a possibility of incredible rage. You know, I don't know how to fix it. You know, God will have to help me. I don't like to be challenged on that up front. You know, I don't like to have bad things happen to people I love. It's too, it's very tender. I needed that. That one I have to sort of say, Lord, let me not be tempted beyond that which I am able to bear, which he has promised to do. But then I fear sometimes. I don't fear, but like I know maybe I can bear much more than I realize. And that would be, I don't desire to be, you know, that's the cup I don't want to drink. Rejoice evermore. Pray without ceasing. There's a short verse. Rejoice evermore. Rejoice. There's a scripture song. Rejoice in the Lord always, and I say again, rejoice. Let your moderation be known to all men. The Lord is near. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication. And I can't remember the rest of it. I had a song I started that. I never quite finished that one. I think I have it recorded somewhere. I don't even know if it's on my website. Pray without ceasing. In everything, give thanks. Rejoice evermore. So always rejoicing that God has given you the promise of everlasting life. And in everything, all the trials of life, all the most painful cups you may have to drink are given for your benefit, ultimately, for your ultimate good. So why would you not rejoice? You know, Paul, rejoice even in the difficult things. It's not to say that it's easy to have that mindset. It's not easy because God has given us a promise. We trust in the promise. We have faith in the promise. But our levels of confidence may not be so high. You know, like Peter walked on the water with Jesus. He had enough faith to step out on the water to walk with him on the water. But even in the midst of that miraculous thing, he looked at the sea and the waves roaring, and he doubted, and he feared, and he began to sink. So even with much assurance, even with the Lord right there in front of him, he had the ability to doubt and to fear and to, you know, not really enjoy the why not go skipping over the waves? You know, it's like it's almost like an amusement park. You know what I mean? Like the sea and the waves going up and down and up and down, and you're able to walk over them. You know, why not enjoy it to the fullest? But I mean, obviously, that would take so much faith and understanding to like just literally just be like, to fully believe in what you were even doing. And it's funny because you would think it would be easy. Like I really think that like you would think that once walking on the water, you'd be like, just have the realization dawn. It's like, I'm walking with God and I can just do whatever I please. I mean, not that whatever I please, but what I mean is like, I can do all things. I mean, in this mode where I am walking with him, I can walk over this water. I can run over this water. I could skip over this water. I could do gymnastics over the water. I mean, I'm over the water. I'm not going to sink. You know what I mean? It's like, and so no matter what the sea and the waves roaring about you are, when the fierce winds are blowing and the waves are rising and it seems like there are threats on every side, to be able to rejoice knowing that God ultimately has you in his hand and your safety and your preservation is his goal. And it is an assurance that he gives you. To be able to have that is a very difficult, that is a high level of faith that very few people have yet attained. And Peter was young, and who knows, he was eventually crucified upside down, so that is reported. And I hope that he did so rejoicing. Pray without ceasing. That's a little bit of a hyperbolic thing, but in general, like it says, pray always. And that's something, what it means is to have like a prayerful mindset. Anything that comes up, instead of giving way to fear or giving way to doubt, we should pray to the Lord. And Peter, when he started doubting, he did pray to the Lord. He said, Lord, help me, I'm sinking. That is a prayer. And then Jesus reached out his hand and brought him up. Why did you doubt? So, in the midst of our fears, if we're finding it difficult to rejoice in our faith, the consistent turning to God in prayer, speaking to him, and to me, like I've said this before, and I forgot which study I did, but I don't pray with my eyes turned up towards heaven. I just pray right here, right now, because this is where God is. He's with me right now. He is with me, and so here is where my prayers are. I speak to him because he is right here with me, always. And so I don't need to go looking to the sky. I do sometimes by instinct that I think I feel when you feel separated from God, he is far away and in the heavens and far removed. It's like, because you feel that way. It's like God is not in the earth. He's not in the things that are going around me. God isn't in this, but he is right in it. He is there right in it with you. And all the things you're going through, he is right there with you. And so we have the ability to speak to him in any circumstance, and it is the wise thing to do, to speak to the Lord. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ concerning you. Be thankful. Be thankful. I find it easy to be thankful for the great things in my life. And I wake up every morning thinking about, I certainly, sometimes I wake up and I have on my mind difficult things or challenges I'm going through, stuff to do with work, financial things, whatever it happens to be. There's 1,000 things, right? That could trouble me, bother me. And if I feel things starting to get to me, or like the thoughts trying to overwhelm me, and I can't do anything about it, not at that moment. There's nothing, a lot of times there's nothing to be done. And I remember, I remind myself of all the ways in which the Lord has blessed me, all the great blessings he's bestowed upon me. And, when I was younger, I didn't see how blessed I was, because I had not lived enough life in the midst of such blessing to see the level of blessing. But now, as a more middle age, I can see how blessed I am, and so therefore really be thankful. And that definitely, thankfulness and gratefulness towards God helps you overcome negative feelings. It does. If you think about all you do have, as opposed to meditating on problems that you can't necessarily solve. If you got a problem, go and solve it. If it's like a bill you got to pay, then go and pay it. Or if you can't, then figure out how to solve that. If you can't figure it out, if you can't do whatever, then don't worry about it. Don't forget about it necessarily, but instead, if it's tormenting you and you can't, and you literally, it's something you can't take care of at that moment. If you can't go out and apply for a job, if you can't go out and, go apply for a loan, if you can't go out and do whatever it might be that will fix the problem, and thinking about it won't do any good, then turn your mind rather towards God and be thankful for all he has given you, and for the fact that whatever is going on, it's going to work out for your good. God wants us to be thankful. That's part of like the sense of gratitude that in the parable I talk about, where the guy was invited to the wedding feast. He showed up without a wedding garment on. He was disrespectful to the fact that he'd been invited to a big fancy wedding, and he showed up in just his street clothes. That's unacceptable. He was rude and disrespectful. He wasn't grateful and respectful, which is God. That's God's will, that we would be grateful, thankful. If we aren't, then it's sort of like we're not really walking in faith, because your faith should tell you that God has ordered. It tells us that God has ordered things for our benefits, and look at the benefits you already have. Look at the good things you have. I'm still breathing, and it tastes good. So there's all kinds of reasons to be thankful. And there's enough verses here, we cannot finish this chapter. But if next week, if tomorrow, next year, we complete this, we will continue into 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. And so I'll leave you with that. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again really soon. In fact, tomorrow, same time. And let's find some music to go out with. Let's just go out the way we came in.